I wasn't supposed to find it. That's the first thing I need to say. If I had just closed my laptop 5 minutes earlier, or ignored that weird autofill suggestion, none of this would have happened. I would have gone on thinking Tanner was just Tanner, my slightly awkward, annoyingly attractive coworker who always double-checked my reports and brought me coffee like it was no big deal. But instead, I found his blog. And not just any blog, a private one. Hidden. Unlisted. The kind you only stumble across if you type something very specific into a search bar. It started stupidly. I was trying to log into a shared work tool, and my browser suggested an old link, something like Tanner Notes. I didn't even think. I clicked it. At first, I thought it was just work stuff. Plain background. Minimal design. A list of entries with dates. But the titles, they weren't corporate. Not even close. Things I almost said today. Why he doesn't notice. He sat next to me again. My chest tightened a little, but I still didn't connect it. I told myself it was probably about someone else. Some girlfriend. Some secret life I didn't know about. Then I clicked one. And everything shifted. Today David laughed at something I said, and I swear I forgot how to breathe for a second. I froze. Actually froze. My hand was still on the trackpad, my coffee halfway to my mouth, just suspended there. David. That's me. I reread the line 3 times, like maybe I was misinterpreting it, like maybe there was another David in the office I'd somehow forgotten about. There wasn't. He kept writing. He does this thing where he leans back in his chair when he laughs, like he's trying to stretch the moment out. I wonder if he knows how much space he takes up when he does that. Probably not. He never seems to notice what he does to people. A weird heat crept up my neck. Because yeah, I did that. I knew I did. People had pointed it out before. But the way Tanner described it, it wasn't casual. It wasn't observational. It was personal. Too personal. I scrolled. I almost asked him today. Not directly. Just suggested we grab dinner after work. But then he smiled at me like that, like we were just friends, and I lost my nerve again. My heart started beating faster. Dinner? Tanner had never asked me to dinner. We'd grabbed lunch a few times, sure. Coffee almost every morning. But that was normal. Friendly, right? I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very aware of how quiet my apartment was. The kind of silence that presses in on you, makes every thought louder. Because now I couldn't unsee it. All those little things. The way he'd linger at my desk a bit longer than necessary. How he always remembered exactly how I take my coffee. The way his eyes would flick to mine during meetings, then quickly away. I always thought, I don't know what I thought, that he was just nice. I kept reading. Couldn't stop. The entries went back months. Small moments all centered around me. David wore that blue shirt again. I think it's my favorite. He touched my arm today when he was explaining something. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. I've been thinking about it all afternoon. He looked tired. I wanted to tell him he should rest, but that felt like crossing a line I don't have the right to cross. It was overwhelming. Not in a bad way. Just intense. Like seeing yourself through someone else's eyes for the first time and realizing you'd missed an entire story happening right next to you. And then I hit the post that made my stomach drop. It was from 2 days ago. The title alone made my pulse spike. I think I'm finally going to do it. I hesitated before clicking. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me already knew this was where things would change. But I clicked anyway. I can't keep pretending this is nothing. It's not nothing. It hasn't been for a long time. I think he might say yes. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But there are moments, small ones, where it feels like he sees me too. So I'm going to ask him. Not just coffee. Not lunch. A real date. I've already planned it out. There's this small place not far from the office, quiet. Warm lighting, nothing too intense. Somewhere he won't feel pressured. I just need to find the right moment. Tomorrow, maybe. Yeah, tomorrow. I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible in the dark edges of it. Tomorrow. That was today. I checked the time instinctively, like that would somehow change things. It wouldn't, because in a few hours I was going to walk into the office. and Tanner was going to ask me out on a real date. I sat there for a long time after that, not moving, not thinking clearly, just processing. Because the truth was, this shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did. There had been moments, subtle ones, easy to ignore if you wanted to, and I had wanted to, but now I had a front row seat to everything he'd been feeling. Every hesitation, every almost confession, every time he chose silence instead of risking it. And somehow that made this feel bigger than just a simple question. The worst part? I didn't know what my answer was. Not yet, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I barely slept that night, not because I was anxious exactly, or okay, maybe I was, but it was more than that. My brain just wouldn't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing those lines from his blog. I've already planned it out. A real date. With me. I must have checked the time at least 10 times before my alarm even went off. When it finally did, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling like I was about to walk into some kind of test I hadn't studied for. And the worst part? I still didn't know what I was going to say. The morning felt off. Not in an obvious way. Everything looked normal. Same street, same people rushing to work, same overpriced coffee place on the corner. But I felt different. Like I was carrying a secret that didn't belong to me. Because technically, I wasn't supposed to know. Tanner had no idea I'd seen any of it. To him, today was just the day he'd finally work up the courage to ask me out. To me, it was like watching a scene play out when I'd already read the script. I got to the office earlier than usual. Big mistake. Because now I had time to sit there and think. I dropped my bag by my desk, booted up my computer, tried to pretend everything was fine. Normal. Routine. It didn't work. Every little sound made me look up. Every time someone walked past, my brain immediately jumped to, is that him? It wasn't. Not yet. When he finally walked in, I felt it before I even saw him. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. There's just something about Tanner's presence, quiet, but noticeable if you're paying attention. And now, I was definitely paying attention. I looked up, and there he was. Same as always. Dark hoodie. Slightly messy hair like he'd run his hands through it too many times. That focused expression he gets when he's already thinking about work before even sitting down. Normal. Completely normal. Except now I knew what was going on in his head. And suddenly, nothing about this felt normal anymore. Morning. His voice snapped me out of it. I blinked, realizing he'd stopped by my desk like he always did. Hey, I said, maybe a little too quickly. Did that sound weird? Sounded weird. He didn't seem to notice though. Or maybe he did and he was just better at hiding it than I was. He held up a coffee. Got you this, he said casual. Like it was nothing. But now I knew. This wasn't just coffee. This was him trying. Thanks, I said, taking it. Our fingers brushed for half a second. And yeah, I felt it. Not in some over-the-top movie kind of way. Just a small jolt. Enough to make me aware of it. Enough to make me think about all the times he'd written about moments exactly like that. I pulled my hand back a little too fast. He noticed that. I could tell by the way his expression shifted just slightly. Not obvious, but there. Like a flicker of doubt. And immediately I felt bad. Because he didn't know I was reacting to everything. Not just that moment. You okay? He asked. Simple question. Way too loaded. Yeah, I said, forcing a small smile. Just didn't sleep great. That part, at least, was true. He nodded like he understood. Same, he said. And for a second our eyes met. There was something there. Something I'd probably ignored before. But now I couldn't. The morning dragged. Every interaction felt heavier than it should have. Every glance, every small conversation, it all had this underlying tension I couldn't shake. Or maybe it was just me, because I knew. Around noon I realized something. He hadn't asked me yet. And that didn't match what he wrote. Tomorrow, maybe. Today was tomorrow. So what was he waiting for? I caught myself watching him more than I should. From across the office, over my screen, pretending to focus while actually tracking his every move. He looked off. Not bad, just distracted. Like he was building up to something and couldn't quite get there. At one point, I saw him open his phone, type something, then stop, delete it, lock the screen. Hesitation. Exactly like in his blog. And that's when it hit me. He might not do it. Not because he didn't want to, but because that's what he always did. He got close, and then backed off. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. If I did nothing, there was a real chance today would just pass. And everything would stay exactly the same. He'd keep writing, keep wondering, keep not knowing. But now I had a choice. I could pretend I didn't know anything, let him struggle through it on his own. Or I could do something. The idea made my stomach twist. Because stepping in meant changing the dynamic completely. It meant risking whatever this was. I glanced over at him again. He was staring at his screen, jaw slightly tense, like he was arguing with himself internally. And for some reason, that decided it for me. I stood up before I could overthink it. Walked over to his desk. My heart was beating way faster than it should have been for something this simple. "Hey," I said. He looked up immediately, a little surprised. "Yeah." I hesitated for half a second. Then, "You busy after work?" The silence that followed felt louder than anything else that day, because I could actually see the moment it hit him. Like everything he'd been building up to suddenly flipped. Like I just stepped into a role he thought he had to play alone. His eyes searched my face. Confused. Hopeful. Careful. No," he said slowly. "Why?" I swallowed. This was it. No going back now. "I was thinking," I started, trying to keep my voice steady, "maybe we could grab dinner." And just like that, everything changed. For a second, I thought I'd completely misread everything. Like maybe I'd imagined the blog. Imagined the tension. Imagined all those moments he wrote about. Because Tanner just stared at me. Not in a bad way. Just like his brain had short-circuited. "Dinner?" he repeated. Like he needed to hear it again to make sure it was real. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual even though my pulse was doing something stupid in my chest. "If you're free." He blinked once, then twice, and then I saw it. That shift. The exact kind he'd written about. That mix of disbelief and hope. Like he didn't quite trust what was happening, but didn't want to question it too much in case it disappeared. "Yeah," he said again, this time more firmly. "I mean, yeah, I'd like that." There it was. No hesitation this time. I nodded, pretending like this wasn't a big deal. "Cool," I said. "We can just go after work." Yeah, that works." We both kind of lingered there for a second, like there was more to say, but neither of us knew how to say it without making it too real. So I just gave a small nod and turned back toward my desk before I could overthink it. The second I sat down, I exhaled. Hard. Because what the hell had I just done? I tried to focus on work after that. I really did. But it was pointless. Every few minutes, my brain would replay that moment. The way his voice changed. The way his eyes looked at me after I said it. Like I just handed him something he didn't think he was allowed to have. And the weird part? I felt good. Nervous, yeah, definitely. But also, something else. Something lighter. I risked a glance over at him. Big mistake. Because now he was doing the same thing I'd been doing all morning. Sneaking looks. Looking away when I caught him. Trying and failing to act normal. At one point, our eyes met across the room. This time, neither of us looked away immediately. And there was this quiet understanding there. Unspoken, but very real. The rest of the day went by like that. Small interactions. Careful glances. That constant awareness of each other that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, and I just hadn't noticed. By the time 5 o'clock hit, I was more nervous than I expected. Which was ridiculous. It was just dinner. With a coworker. Except it wasn't. And we both knew it. We ended up leaving at the same time. Not planned. Just happened. I grabbed my bag, he grabbed his, and we sort of fell into step next to each other like we'd done it 100 times before. But this time it felt different. More intentional. "So," he said as we walked out of the building. shoving his hands into his hoodie pockets. "Where do you want to go?" I almost laughed, because I knew the answer. I knew exactly where he had planned to take me. Quiet place. Warm lighting. Not too intense. Could have said it. Could have tested him. But something about that felt wrong. Like crossing a line I wasn't supposed to cross. "I don't know," I said instead. "You got any ideas?" He hesitated. There it was again. That internal battle. I could practically hear the thoughts running through his head. Do I say it? Is it too obvious? What if he doesn't like it? "Yeah," he said finally. "There's this place. Not far from here." "Of course there is." I nodded. "Lead the way." The walk there was quiet. Not awkward. Just careful. Like we were both adjusting to something new and didn't want to mess it up by saying the wrong thing too soon. When we got there, I had to stop myself from reacting. Because it was exactly how he described it. Small. Warm lighting. Calm, but not empty. He really had planned this. Every detail. "This okay?" he asked, glancing at me like he was bracing for rejection. "Yeah," I said, maybe a little too quickly. "It's perfect." And I meant that. We got seated, across from each other. And suddenly, there was no more distraction. No work. No screens. Just us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he let out a small breath, almost like a quiet laugh. "This feels weird," he admitted. I smiled a little. "Yeah, it does." Another pause. Then, "I was gonna ask you," he said, just like that. No build-up. No hiding it. My heart skipped. "I figured," I said before I could stop myself. He frowned slightly. "Figured. Shit." I felt it immediately. That tiny shift in the air. That moment where I'd said something I wasn't supposed to. I leaned back slightly, trying to recover. "I mean, not like figured," I said quickly. "Just, I don't know. Felt like you were building up to something." That wasn't a lie. Just not the full truth. He studied my face for a second, like he was trying to decide if that made sense. Then slowly he nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I was." And just like that, the moment passed. Barely. But now my heart was racing for a completely different reason. Because I realized something. If I wasn't careful, he might figure out I knew. And if that happened, everything could get a lot more complicated. I shouldn't have said that. The second the words left my mouth, I figured. I knew I'd stepped too close to something I wasn't supposed to touch. And the worst part? Tanner noticed. Not fully. Not enough to call me out. But just enough that something shifted in his expression for a second too long. Like he was trying to connect dots that didn't quite line up. I forced myself to relax. To act normal. Because if I started acting weird now, he would figure it out. And I didn't even know what figuring it out would lead to. "So," I said, picking up the menu even though I wasn't really reading it. "You come here a lot?" "Smooth. Real smooth." He huffed out a quiet laugh. "Not really," he said. "Just sometimes." I nodded, pretending to scan the options. But my brain caught on that pause. "Just sometimes." "Yeah, sure." The waiter came, which helped. We ordered. Simple stuff. Nothing too complicated. Something to fill the silence. Once they left, though, it was just us again. And this time, the silence felt heavier. Not awkward. Just honest. Tanner leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose like he was trying to steady himself. "I almost didn't do this," he said. I looked up. "What? Come here." "Ask you," he clarified. I felt that in my chest. Because yeah, I knew that already, but hearing him say it out loud? Different. "Why not?" I asked. He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "Didn't think you'd say yes." There was no self-pity in it. No dramatic tone. Just a simple fact the way he saw it. I leaned back slightly, studying him. "You could have asked me before." His eyes flicked up to mine. "Yeah," he said. "I know." Another pause. Then quieter. "I just didn't want to mess things up." That hit harder than I expected. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about a date. It was about everything leading up to it. All those months of him choosing not to say something. choosing safe over uncertain. You wouldn't have, I said. He gave a small, almost disbelieving smile. You don't know that. I held his gaze. Neither do you. That landed. I could see it. The way his expression softened. Just a little. Like maybe, just maybe, he was letting himself believe that. The food came not long after. And for a bit, things got easier. We talked about normal stuff. Work. Random office drama. A stupid meeting from last week. Familiar territory. Safe. But underneath it, that tension was still there. Not bad. Just present. Like both of us were aware this wasn't just two coworkers grabbing dinner. At one point, he laughed at something I said. And I noticed it. The exact thing he wrote about. The way I leaned back slightly. The way the moment stretched just a little longer. And this time, I didn't look away. I watched him. Watched the way his expression changed. The way his eyes stayed on me just a second too long. He noticed that. Of course he did. His laugh faded slightly, replaced by something quieter. More focused. What? He asked. I shook my head. Nothing. But I was smiling. And I think that threw him off more than anything else. We fell into another one of those pauses. But this one, it didn't feel heavy. Felt charged. I'm glad you asked me, he said suddenly. I blinked. You mean, me asking you? He nodded. Yeah. There was something honest about the way he said it. Like he wasn't trying to overthink it anymore. Just saying what he felt. Me too, I admitted. And that was the truth. Even if I still didn't fully understand why yet. He looked at me for a second. Really looked. Like he was trying to read something deeper. Can I ask you something? He said. And there it was. That shift. That moment where things stopped being casual. Yeah, I said. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then, why today? My stomach dropped. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But enough that I felt it. Because that was the question. The one I didn't have a clean answer for. Not one I could give him. I could have said anything. Felt like it. Good timing. Why not? But none of that would be true. Not really. Because the real answer was sitting back at my apartment. On my laptop. In a blog I was never supposed to see. I met his eyes. And for a second, I considered telling him. Just putting it out there. Ending the tension. But I didn't. Instead, I said, I don't know. Not a lie. But not the truth either. He held my gaze. Like he was trying to decide if that was enough. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. But something in his eyes told me. This conversation wasn't over. I could tell he didn't fully buy my answer. Not in a confrontational way. Tanner's not like that. He's not the type to push or corner someone. But he noticed. And now it was sitting there between us, quiet, unspoken, but very real. The rest of dinner didn't fall apart. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense in a bad way. But something had shifted. Like we'd stepped just a little closer to the truth. And then stopped right before actually reaching it. We kept talking. Easier topics. Safe ones. But every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me differently. More carefully. Like he was trying to understand something he couldn't quite see. And honestly, that made me more nervous than if he'd just asked me directly. By the time we finished eating, I felt full. Not just from the food. From everything. The conversation. The tension. The things said and unsaid. We stepped outside, and the night air hit differently. Cooler. Quieter. Like the world had slowed down just a bit. So, I said, shoving my hands into my jacket pockets. That was good. Yeah, he said. It was. We stood there for a second. Neither of us moving. This was the part where one of us says goodbye. Keeps things simple. Goes home. But neither of us did. You in a rush? He asked. I shook my head. No. He nodded slightly, like he was deciding something. Wanna walk a bit? I hesitated. Just for a second. Then, yeah. We started walking without a real direction. Just side by side. Close but not quite touching. The city felt different at night. Quieter, like everything was softened around the edges. It made it easier to think. Or maybe harder. I meant what I said earlier, he said after a while. I glanced at him. About what? About not wanting to mess things up. I slowed slightly, not stopping, just enough to feel the weight of that. I like what we have, he continued. Even before this. That hit, because I knew exactly what he meant. All those small moments, the routine, the comfort. Me too, I said. He looked at me then, really looked, and there was something vulnerable there, something he wasn't hiding anymore. But this, he added quieter now, this feels different. It did. There was no point pretending otherwise. Yeah, I said softly. It does. We kept walking, slower now, and then, after a few steps, I need to ask you something else. I exhaled quietly. Of course he did. Okay. He stopped this time, and I stopped with him. Are you sure about this? He asked. Simple question, but not simple at all. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? He ran a hand through his hair, looking away for a second before meeting my eyes again. I don't want this to be something you're trying out. That stung a little, not because he was wrong, but because I understood why he'd think that. I'm not, I said. He studied my face, searching. Then what is it? He asked. And there it was again. That same question. Different words. Same meaning. Why today? Why now? I felt it building in my chest. That pressure. Because I couldn't keep dancing around it forever. He deserved something real. Not half answers. Not deflections. I looked away for a second, then back at him. I found something, I said. The moment I said it, I knew there was no going back. His expression changed instantly. Not panic, not fear, just alert. What do you mean? He asked. My heart started beating faster. I wasn't supposed to, I added quickly. It just happened. He didn't say anything, but I could see it. That shift, that realization starting to form. What did you find? He asked, quieter now. I swallowed. Your blog. Silence. Real silence this time, like the world around us just paused. Tanner didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink for a second. And then, I saw it. Everything hit him at once. The realization, the exposure, every private thought he'd written. Suddenly not private anymore. You read it? He asked. His voice wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. I nodded. Yeah. Another pause. Longer this time. And then he let out a breath. Slow. Controlled. How much? He asked. I hesitated. Enough. That was honest. And he knew it. He looked away. Ran his hand through his hair again, slower this time. Okay, he said quietly. But that one word? It wasn't okay. Not really. And standing there, in that silence, I realized something. This was the moment that could either bring us closer or completely ruin everything. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. And I mean nothing. No shifting, no awkward filler words, just silence hanging there. Heavy enough that I could feel it in my chest. Tanner looked exposed. Not embarrassed exactly. Not angry either. Just seen in a way he hadn't agreed to. And yeah, I deserved that. I didn't mean to find it, I said quickly. It just came up. I didn't even know it was yours at first. He nodded once, still not looking at me. I figured, he said quietly. That hurt more than if he'd snapped at me. Because he wasn't making a scene. He was just processing. I shouldn't have read it, I added. This time he let out a small breath through his nose. No, he said. You probably shouldn't have. Fair. Completely fair. I shifted my weight slightly, suddenly very aware of how close we were standing. But I did, I said. And I know that's not something I can just undo. He finally looked at me then, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not just vulnerability, something sharper. So that's why, he asked. There it was again. That question. Only now it was heavier, more direct. That's why you asked me out? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because if I answered that wrong, this was over. It's not the only reason, I said carefully. His expression didn't change, which somehow made it worse. But it is a reason, he said. Not a question. I nodded. Yeah. Another silence. He looked away again, jaw tightening slightly. That's, he started, then stopped. Ran a hand through his hair again. That's kind of messed up, David. That one landed hard. I know, I said, and I meant it. No defense. No excuses. Just the truth. I didn't plan it like that, I added. I wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, he likes me. I should do something about it. He didn't respond, so I kept going. I read it, and yeah, it hit me, I said. But not in a manipulative way. Not like I was trying to take advantage of it. He looked back at me, still guarded. Then what? He asked. I exhaled slowly, trying to find the right words. It made me realize something, I said. He didn't interrupt this time. That there was already something there, I continued. I just wasn't really letting myself see it. That was the closest I could get to the truth without over-explaining. Something? He repeated. Yeah, I said. With you. His eyes searched my face again, deeper this time. And you needed my blog to figure that out? He asked. Ouch. No, I said quickly. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? He pushed. There it was. A little edge. Not aggressive, but real. I stepped a little closer without really thinking about it. Not touching him. Just closing the distance. I'm saying I probably would have gotten here eventually, I said. You just got there first. That made him pause. I just didn't know how to read it, I added. Before. He held my gaze, and I could see it. That internal conflict. Because part of him was still hurt, but another part was listening. You should have told me, he said. I blinked. What? If you noticed something, he clarified. If you felt something. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ironic. You mean like you did? I said softly. That stopped him. Not in a defensive way. Just enough to make him realize what he'd said. We stood there for a second. Both of us caught in the same realization. Neither of us had said anything. For months. I was scared, he admitted quietly. I nodded. Yeah, me too. That shifted something. Subtle, but important. The tension didn't disappear, but it softened. I still don't like that you read it, he said. Yeah, I said. That's fair. Another pause. But, he added slower this time. I waited. You're here. I nodded. Yeah. With me, he said. Yeah. And for the first time since I told him, his expression changed. Not fully relaxed, but less guarded. Okay, he said quietly. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But not rejection either. And honestly, at that moment, that was enough. We didn't move right away after that. Still standing there, a little too close, a little too aware of each other. But something had changed. Not fixed. Not fully resolved. Just steadier. I don't want this to be weird tomorrow, Tanner said after a while. I let out a small breath. Yeah, I said. Me neither. He nodded like that mattered more than anything else right now. And I got it. Because whatever this was becoming, it still had to exist in real life. At work. Around other people. In all the normal, everyday spaces we already shared. We can just take it slow, I added. He looked at me, considering that. Slow is good, he said. Another pause. But this one didn't feel heavy anymore. Felt like something starting. We started walking again. No rush. Just moving because standing still felt like too much. After a few minutes, our hands brushed. Accidentally. At least, I think it was. Neither of us pulled away immediately. And that tiny moment felt louder than anything we'd said all night. I glanced at him. He was already looking at me. Still okay? He asked. It was such a simple question. But I knew what he meant. Not just this. Everything. Yeah, I said, and this time, there was no hesitation. We kept walking like that, close enough that our arms kept brushing every now and then, neither of us commenting on it, neither of us avoiding it either. Eventually, we ended up back near my place. Not planned, just where the walk took us. I stopped near the entrance. "So, this is me," I said. He nodded. "Yeah." Neither of us moved again. Of course, this was another one of those moments. The kind where something either happens or doesn't. "I had a good time," he said. "Me too. And I meant it. Even with everything. Especially with everything." He shifted slightly, like he was about to step back. Like he was ready to leave it there. Safe. And for a second, I almost let him. But then I remembered something. All those entries. All those almost moments. All the times he stopped himself. And I didn't want to do that. Not again. So before I could overthink it, I reached out. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just my hand lightly catching his wrist. He froze. Not pulling away. Just waiting. I stepped a little closer. Close enough that I could see the shift in his breathing. "Hey," I said quietly. "Yeah." I hesitated for half a second. Then, "I'm glad I found it." His brows pulled together slightly. Not defensive. Just confused. "My blog?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." He studied my face, trying to understand. "Not because of what it said," I added quickly, "but because it made me stop pretending I didn't see what was already there." That landed. I could tell. "Which is?" he asked, softer now. I swallowed. "This," I said, and then I closed the distance. It wasn't rushed, wasn't messy, just intentional. My lips brushed his, like testing. For a split second, everything went completely still. And then he kissed me back. Not hesitant, not unsure, just there, like he'd been holding that in for longer than I realized. It wasn't a long kiss, but it didn't need to be. When we pulled back, we stayed close, foreheads almost touching, breathing slightly uneven, and for the first time all day, neither of us looked uncertain. "Okay," he said quietly. I smiled a little. "Yeah." And somehow, that felt like more than enough. I didn't sleep much that night either. But this time, it wasn't because my brain wouldn't shut up. It was because every time I did drift off, I'd replay that moment outside my building. The way he looked at me, the way he said, "Okay," like it meant something bigger than just the word. The next morning felt different, not heavy, not confusing, just new. I got ready slower than usual, not on purpose. I just kept catching myself thinking about him, about what this was now, because it wasn't just a one-time thing. It didn't feel like that. When I got to the office, I had that same feeling as yesterday, that awareness. Except this time, it wasn't one-sided. I saw him almost immediately, sitting at his desk already working. But the second I walked in, he looked up, and just like that, everything from last night came rushing back. We didn't say anything right away. Didn't need to. There was this small moment. Just eye contact. Just enough to say yeah. That happened. Then he gave me a slight nod. Almost like a quiet acknowledgement. I smiled back. Same kind of energy. And somehow, that was enough to get through the first part of the morning. Things weren't weird. That was the surprising part. We still worked. Still had meetings. Still existed around other people like normal. But under that, there was something else. At one point, I passed by his desk. And without thinking, I tapped my fingers lightly against it. Just once. He looked up, caught my eye, and there it was again. That small, private understanding. No one else noticed. But we did. Around lunch, he came over. Like he always did. But this time, there was a pause. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Another pause. Then, "Wanna grab something?" I smirked slightly. "Like a real lunch?" He rolled his eyes, but there was a hint of a smile there. "Yeah, a real lunch." I stood up. "Yeah, let's go." And just like that, we stepped into something new without making it a big deal. No dramatic conversation. No labels. No pressure. Just choosing each other. Again. Over the next few days, things settled into something that felt surprisingly natural. We didn't rush. Didn't try to define it immediately. But the little things, they changed. Sitting closer. Talking longer. Walking out together more often than not. And sometimes, when no one was paying attention, our hands would brush. Stay there for a second longer than necessary. Like we were both still getting used to the idea that we could. A week later, I was back at my apartment. Same place where this whole thing started. I opened my laptop, stared at the screen for a second. Then I typed it in. That same blog. I hesitated before clicking. Not because I wasn't curious, but because now felt different. Before, it had been something hidden. Something I wasn't supposed to see. Now, I clicked. There was a new entry. Dated today. My chest tightened a little as I opened it. I didn't expect it to happen like this. Honestly, I thought I'd mess it up. Or freeze. Or wait too long like I always do. But he asked me. And for a second, I didn't even know how to react. Not because I didn't want it. Because I did. More than I probably should have. But because it felt impossible. Like something I'd built up in my head for so long that I stopped believing it could actually be real. But it is. He's real. This is real. And I don't know exactly where it's going yet. But for the first time, I'm not overthinking it. I'm just in it. I stared at the screen for a long time after that. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. Again, I grabbed my phone. Me? You're still writing about me? Huh? I stared at the message for a second. Then hit send. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then came back. Tanner, you read it again? I smiled to myself. Me? Yeah. A pause. Tanner, you're really not supposed to do that. I leaned back slightly, grin growing. Me? Maybe you shouldn't make it so easy to find. This time, the typing took longer. Then, Tanner. Or maybe I stopped trying to hide it. That made my chest tighten in a completely different way. I stared at that message. Then typed. Me? Good. A few seconds later. Tanner. Come over? I didn't even hesitate. Me? On my way. I grabbed my keys. Heart already picking up. Because yeah, this started with something I wasn't supposed to see. But where it ended. That part. We were writing together.